Hello world, welcome back to the Razor RC. In this video we are doing the full review of the Losi 8 RTR Nitro Buggy. This is a 1/8 scale ready to run nitro buggy that has been out for I'd say about 4 or 5 years, although they did actually release a V2 version last year, but it was a really minor update. All they really did was change out the radio from the DX2E to the SLT3 Spectrum. It's pretty much based off the 8 3.0, which came out about, I don't know, 9-10 years ago, something like that. So it is based off of a pretty old race buggy. Since the 3.0, they actually released a 4.0, they released the 8X, the 8XE or Elite, and then now they actually have the 8X 2.0. So yeah, this is kind of an old race buggy in a ready to run format, and yeah, we're going to be doing the full review of this vehicle. Now we're going to be covering this in 7 different categories, giving a rating from 1 to 5 stars, and it's graded on a curve. So 1 star would mean quite poor, 3 stars would mean average, 5 stars would mean best in class, and this is as compared to the other ready to run nitro 8 scale buggies out there, like the Kyosho Inferno Neo 3.0, which I have, like the HPI Trophy 3.5. There's not a whole lot of other full-on race buggies out there in a ready to run format. Serpent makes one, and then Kyosho also has a higher end MP9 TKI4. I don't have those, but I do have a couple of the other nitro powered buggies out there, so pretty familiar with this class and feel like I have a pretty good handle on things. Now the nitro RTR, as you can see, aluminum chassis. This is a stamped piece, a little bit different than the kit version, had a 7075 aluminum piece. A lot of the parts on this thing are actually from the full-on 8 3.0, but they did kind of cheapen some things. In addition to the chassis, they did use basically stamped shock towers front and rear, so they are 5mm, but obviously not as nice as the full-on TLR spec stuff. They do have plastic composite shocks rather than the aluminum ones on the TLR version, and they do have fixed links as opposed to the adjustable links like you would find on the 3.0. I think the 3.0 also had aluminum knuckles here in the front, not 100% sure. So this is a little bit cheapened down. It sells for $470. I think the kit back then probably cost around $500 or more, so obviously that's where they reduce the cost. But it does come in a ready to run version. It does have the engine, the 2 servos. It even includes like a nickel metal hydride 1600 milliamp hour 5-cell battery pack. So this only runs at 6 volts, not super powerful, but you know, enough to get you running. So it is nice that it includes that, and then obviously the radio and receiver. So the SLT3 radio is kind of their entry level radio that comes in a lot of vehicles. The receiver that comes in the box is the SLR 300, so it is not compatible with other radios. Some of the other SLT3s actually come with an SR 315 receiver, which you could work with other DSMR Spectrum radios, but this one is not. It's pretty much just only can be used with the included radio. So yeah, let's get into the review and talk about how this thing rates. First category is the engine and the electronics. Like I mentioned, SLT3 radio, actually a really good radio. Does have all the adjustments you need. A nice foam steering wheel, nice trigger, steering trim, throttle trim, steering dual rate, and then does have a couple adjustments on the back, which you probably would not use. Throttle limiter, you're not really going to use. It does have throttle reversing and steering reversing, which you will need to match your servo orientation, of course. Also does have endpoint adjustment. It is a featured document in the SLT3 radio. I would check that out because you want to make sure you set your endpoints correct on your servos. Especially important in a nitro vehicle. You don't want your throttle servo going too far or your steering endpoints being set all wrong. That will definitely cause additional strain on the servos and make them fail more easily. The radio, I think, is actually pretty good. I wish it was including the SR315 receiver, but you know, it's not bad out of the box. This receiver does work fine. The engine is the Dynamite 0.21 cubic inch engine. It's not like super fast or anything like that. I think power wise it's pretty average. It does come with actually a pretty old school pipe. I did replace it out to the Dynamite Platinum 05 M3R, and I'll talk more about why I did that later. That did provide a little more punch, so yeah, this is a nice little improvement if you want a little more power. I also changed out the clutch shoes in the vehicle. It comes with 4 composite clutch shoes. I went to 2 aluminum, 2 composite. That helped it engage a little bit better. That actually livened up the engine quite a bit. I am still running the stock cold gold plug. using Bones Brew 20% nitro fuel, so that is fine. Power-wise, it's not going to be amazing, but with some adjustments, actually you can get a little more power out of it. Engine does tune really nicely. Actually, it does hold a tune quite well. I think it's based off an SH Engine's motor, so it's not, you know, made by Horizon specifically. It's just a rebrand of that. But as you can see, there's one kind of big problem I had with this engine, which is that the cooling head cracked and broke off some of the fins. So that, you know, was rather disappointing. In terms of things I don't like, the servos are pretty much terrible. It comes with the S614 servo here on the steering side. On the throttle side, it actually comes with this, the S605. Radio is actually pretty good, above average. The engine, I would say it's about average. The Kyosho Inferno engine, I think, is a little bit faster. I think the HPI 3.5cc engine is actually a little bit slower. So it's kind of in the middle. It's decent, but I do find that the engine, you know, failure on the, you know, basically durability was a little bit higher than normal. And then I would say the servos are actually really bad. Hopefully they will update those soon. But in the engine electronics category, I got to give it a below average score. I think you will find your servos fail pretty quickly. You will want to upgrade these. They're also really slow. Some of the slowest servos I've ever seen. On the throttle side, I mean, you can tell. Usually on the throttle side, you don't really need super fast servos, but on this one, it does engage really slowly, and the steering is super slow as well. So yeah, in the engine electronics category, I got to give it below average score, 2 stars. I think the radio is fine, the engine is okay, but the servos really bring it down. The TLR8 is based off the TLR8 3.0, so it's pretty much the 3.0 with some slight geometry changes. I think the geometry on the shock tower is just slightly different. It's closer to the 4.0 spec, so some of the mounting holes for where the shocks mount, the camber links mount, is actually a little bit closer to the more updated vehicle, the 4.0, so that's really nice. You know, not a whole lot of adjustments here. You know, obviously the camber, steering, all that stuff's going to be fixed. The springs and shocks, they worked okay. You know, I would say these shocks are not particularly smooth. They do bind quite a bit, but for a sort of a bashing slash racer, I think it works fine. I do like the layout of the vehicle. It's actually really nice, pretty centralized engine here in the beginning, in the motor, and you actually see the drive shafts are super far out to the side. The rear one just goes straight back, and you actually find that the ring and pinion gear are sort of flipped, inverted from where you find on most vehicles, and then the front drive shaft is in an angle. So yeah, it is a pretty unique layout. It does centralize the weight a little bit more. It has a standard Losi air filter, which is nice. And it's got a really nice electronics tray. So 2 servers in the front, really easy to get at. You got the receiver box here and then the battery tray in the back. And with that included battery, I think it's really nice. It does have sway bars front and rear, adjustable droop screws, of course. It is pretty much the full-on race vehicle, just kind of cheapened a little bit. And so, yeah, that's kind of, I guess, you know, good and bad in that sense, in that it is still race spec, but, you know, kind of an older version. Now, some things to note, it does have SAA screws. A couple of those screws are actually metric, which makes it a little bit weird. Like the servo mounting screw here is metric, the engine screws are metric. The rest of the vehicle is all SAE, so you will want to definitely make sure you have Imperial drivers and net drivers and that kind of thing to be able to work on this thing. Not too bad to work on. The discs are easy to get at. Most of the components are pretty easy to get at. You know, the steering rack, you can remove the top plate and get at that. Servos are really easy to service. So overall, the vehicle is actually pretty easy to work on. A pretty decent number of adjustments, all your normal 8-scale race buggy type stuff, except for the fixed links. But other than that, I think it's actually works pretty well in terms of tuning. Steel differentials, of course, all 3 differentials. I think it's like 7K, 7K, 5K in the rear. It just does have 2 gears in all the diffs. So the official race kit version has 4 gears in all the diffs. So I did find the diff fluids to be pretty light. You may want to consider increasing that to maybe more like 15 to 10K in the front and maybe, you know, 5 to 7K in the rear. It will give you a little bit better traction and drive a little more smoothly and capably. So yeah, in the design category, I'm going to give it an average score. You know, I'm not a big fan of the SAE screws, although I would say they're better than having, you know, Phillips head screws. I would say, you know, the plastic shocks, the plastic links, basically no adjustability, is a little bit down. Most of the other, you know, even entry-level RTR vehicles at least have adjustable turnbuckles, adjustable steering links. But I do like some of the design elements. You know, the battery tray I think is actually pretty good. And the one really, I would say, sort of notable flaw in the design is that the engine is actually raised up. Now, it obviously has a pull start. And what they did was, because of the pull start here on the end of the engine, it basically interferes with this brace right here. So they had to raise it up. I think it's about 2 millimeters. And as you can see, basically the flywheel is like way off the bottom of the chassis. So if you want to use a starter box, you actually have to remove the pull start, obviously, get different mounting blocks, which actually have been discontinued, and then try to lower the engine into the chassis so it's just a little bit lower. And I think that also contributes to the engine being smashed in. As you can see, from the shock tower to the wing, the head actually sticks up quite a bit more, sticks out a lot, and oftentimes if you flip obviously down, you're going to be landing on the cooling head, and I think that's why it broke. So yeah, in the design category, I'm going to give it 3 stars. Some of the things I think are pretty nice. It is a full-on race buggy. It does have some of the nicer, more modern features that you see on some of the later TLRs, but it does again have some weirdness like the engine sticking out, the SA screws that I'm not a big fan of. Now onto the important category, which is performance. The 8 actually drives pretty well, especially once you tune it a little bit. I did change out that clutch use. I did find that the power sort of engages kind of late, kind of softly. I did not like the feel of the way the clutch use engaged, so I would recommend getting 2 aluminum shoes. It does say to use the gold springs as well. I'd say that's actually optional. You could probably still run the black springs with the just 2 aluminum shoes, and I think it would actually engage pretty nice. It drives pretty stable. It feels like a fairly heavy vehicle. I'm not sure if it actually is. I didn't weigh it or compare it to other vehicles out there, but it is kind of a stable, easy to drive kind of performance in the handling department. Power wise, yeah, not great out of the box, although you can unleash a little bit more power with the tune pipe. Probably a little more tuning, I should get a little more power out there. And with those adjustments, I do think it is comparable to the higher end Kyosho motor, but out of the box, it was not particularly impressive. It will need a little bit of work to get the most out of that engine. Now, things I don't like, it does nosedive quite a bit. It's not as flat or as neutral as I would say some of the other vehicles out there. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's because the motors and some of the electronics are a little bit more forward. Tank is all the way more forward, so obviously as the fuel tank drops, you'll get less of that effect. Really only the engine is here in the back, and you got the lightweight battery, but that's not a whole lot that's in the back. As you can kind of see, even from the rear shock tower to the engine, there's quite a bit of space. So there's probably an inch of gap where there's no weight at all. It is a little bit more centralized. Does make it a little bit more front heavy, I think, compared to the other vehicles. At least that's the way it feels like it drives. But yeah, that's probably the only thing I would say besides the clutch use I really didn't like about the way it drives. The motors, it's fine. Definitely tune it a little bit. It will hold the tune nicely, which is great, especially for an RTR vehicle, for people probably not quite as expert on tuning a nitro engine. So in the performance category, I'm gonna give it 3 stars. I think it's average. I do think the Kyosho is faster. This one maybe a little bit more stable. The Kyosho I think is quite nimble, quite light as well. So I think it outperforms this a little bit, although I would say it's better than the HPI. The HPI has really soft suspension, not particularly stable, a little bit more difficult to drive. I think this is kind of more on the easy to drive and better handling areas. The Losi 8 has proven to be pretty durable overall. It did have some failures though, and I'm going to cover that. I already mentioned the engine. As you can see, it is cracked. The top fin pretty much broke off. The second fin is already cracked here on the back. It's been holding up since then, so we'll see. Maybe that was just kind of a manufacturing flaw here on the top fin. I don't really know, but definitely something I want to watch out for, especially because the engine sticks up a little bit higher than most vehicles out there. Second concern I had was that the exhaust pipe, pretty much the header basically kept slipping off the coupler here. There's really hardly any flange at all. I would say it's almost like a straight header right there. So any sort of zip tie is not going to stay out. Pretty much on every reasonably sized crash, this thing would slip off. You'd have to go up, pick up your vehicle and reattach it or whatever. So I end up just going to the Dynamite tune pipe. It's got springs to hold the retainer onto the header, and it works a lot better and has been way more reliable. So I would almost consider that to be a must. The other thing that broke are the servos. Both the steering servo and the throttle servo broke. The S605 servo for the throttle, it pretty much seized all the way on the brake side. Fortunately, it did not seize on the full throttle side, so it just jammed itself there. I was able to shut off the vehicle, so no harm. Just had to replace it. I'm actually running a Hobile servo. And then on the steering side, it does come with the S614 servo. Again, that it was a failure for me. This is the second S614 I've broken. I've broken that on other vehicles, and I broke the original one that came on the Losi 8 RTR. The rest of the vehicle has been totally fine. I think a shock cap fell off my shock, but other than that, nothing really broke. No arms, no knuckles. The shocks were fine. Everything else worked totally fine. So I don't think the general vehicle itself is not durable at all. I actually think the whole vehicle is actually really durable. It's just the engine electronics they include, I think, are a little bit weak. The engine cooling head, the servos, those are areas, the pipe, I would say, is worth replacing. Those are the areas I feel was let down durability-wise. So in the durability category, I'm going to give it 3 stars. I think the general vehicle itself, the platform, is actually really durable, probably one of the most durable ones out there. But the components they include with, they're pretty low spec, they're really cheap, a little bit poorly made, and so I think you got to drop it a couple stars for that. Losi is owned by Horizon Hobby, one of the largest, if not the largest, RC manufacturers or holding companies out there that you can get to. Horizon's actually got a really generous warranty. I think it's something like 2 years. They're really easy to work on. I mean, they're a little bit slow on responding to emails and that kind of thing, but you can chat with them. You can call them as well, so you can get help that way. And I would say they're actually really easy to work with in terms of like sending out support. If you need parts that broke and are still covered under that warranty, they will work with you. I've never really had too many problems with Horizon. They are actually probably one of the best out there. So in the support and maintenance category, I'm going to give it 4 stars. I'm going to drop it 1 star for all the SAE screws, which is kind of annoying. And then kind of the big one is that this is based off the 3.0, and I think most of the parts are actually the full-on 3.0 parts. I think the plastic screws, even like some of these shock standoffs, hollow balls, everything's got kind of that bronze, copper kind of look, is really a full-on TLR part. So if you look at the manual, a lot of the parts are actually the TLR parts. Some of the parts are not though, like the stamped shock towers, they are cheaper. The chassis is obviously cheaper, and then the engine is obviously not a TLR part, that's just a dynamite part. But the one concern I had was that because it's based off such an old vehicle, they stopped manufacturing some of these parts. So you cannot buy every part that you see on here. You may need to go to eBay or Amazon or look up a hobby shop. Hopefully that still has one hanging on the wall, because not every single part is still manufactured. And because TLR does not sell the 3.0 anymore, they really have no interest in still producing some of the parts out there. There's nothing that I had too many concerns with on the vehicle. I looked for a couple of the parts like the arms and stuff. They still sell those, which is nice. Some of the screws and stuff can be a little bit harder to find. Like I think one of the screws here on the servo fell out, so I had to find like sort of a compatible screw, a cap head rather than a button head. Not a big deal, but little things like that may be a little bit annoying. There may be some things you may not find. For example, the cooling head, you can't get that separately. So yeah, the support and maintenance category, I'm gonna give 4 stars, but I'm dropping a star because it is an older vehicle. Some of the parts are been discontinued, and you may have difficulty finding some replacements. The 8ight Nitro RTR sells for $470 here in the United States. Its competitors like the HPI Trophy 3.5 sells for, again, for $470, but the Kyosho Inferno Neo 3.0 is quite a bit cheaper at $350. So this is $120 more than the Kyosho, but the same price as the HPI. Now, how do I feel about the value? It's really talking about what you get in the box as opposed to what you actually pay. I think engine-wise, it's kind of average. I think the servo is below average. The radio probably a little bit above average. This is nice that it comes with a battery pack. There is no charger or anything like that, but that's not too bad. Does have aluminum chassis. Shocks are pretty typical for this. All of them pretty much have composite shocks with aluminum adjusters. Does not have adjustable turnbuckles, which I think is kind of cheap. Servos, again, like I said, are kind of cheap. But overall, I think it's kind of a fair price. It's not a really great deal. I think the Kyosho is quite a bit better. The HPI, probably a little bit lower spec than this. I think this has got a little bit better engine and better radio than the HPI. The servos on the HPI, they're really weak, super weak servos, pretty old schools, but they never broke on me, so I can't really say that those are worse. So overall, in the value category at $470, I think what you get is a fair price. Not great, not terrible, but average. $470, 3 stars in this category. So my final thoughts on the Losi 8 RTR. Pretty solid buggy. I don't think it has too many outstanding features. The way it drives is actually pretty solid. You know, it does feel like a full-on race buggy. Something like the HPI feels more like, I don't know, like an entry-level vehicle. This thing, while I wouldn't say it's a modern-day race vehicle, it does feel like something that has been released in the last 5 or 10 years at least. You know, it's not a 20-year-old design, not a 20-year-old buggy. It does have the durability, I think, of a modern vehicle. Performance-wise, yeah, the engine's a little slow. But there is quite a bit of tuning you can do to this. Get a different pipe, maybe run some 30%, maybe do some tuning with the carbs and stuff, different glow plugs. I think get a little bit more power out of this and have it running a little bit better. Carburetor is actually pretty good, so I do like that. It does hold the tune really nice. It is easy to tune. Downsides, the servos are pretty terrible. I would say, you know, be expected to replace those pretty soon after buying this. And you can get to drive actually pretty good. It does have enough adjustments with the shocks, the diffs, the camber link locations, shock mounting locations and stuff. And then if you want to do a little more tuning with the camber, the steering links and stuff, you can swap these out. You can play with the sway bars. You can mess with the brakes, of course. So yeah, overall, it is a race vehicle, albeit an older one. I would say it's kind of an a reasonable way to get into 8th scale nitro racing at like a club level. If you've never raced nitro before, you just want to learn about nitro, I actually think this is a pretty good vehicle to start with if you want to go more on the race buggy side, because Horizon is a pretty big brand. They do have a lot of support. This is a very well-known platform. There's nothing too weird about this other than the SAE screws. People make parts for this. You know, there are setup sheets, that kind of thing. So you do have a place to start. You could actually race this thing because it's not like a 20-year-old design like some of the other RTRs out there. So yeah, overall my thoughts on the Losi 8 RTR, it's a pretty decent buggy. I'm not sure it's the best out there. The Kyoshi is a really strong contender. The HPI has some natural advantages, but this one it's not a bad choice at all. And certainly with some tuning, I am sort of working with this thing, getting it to run a little better. Adjusting the clutch use I think will help a lot, in addition to like the pipe and some of the other things. So yeah, my thoughts on the Losi 8 RTR: solid vehicle, nothing really wrong with it. My main concern is maybe some of the parts can be a little bit more difficult to get to or to buy because it's such an old design. But yeah, solid vehicle overall, and I do enjoy it a lot. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit the like, share, subscribe buttons. Look for more videos soon. Thanks for watching.